Happy Thursday, everybody. We are in the middle of April, which is uh, very fast. Very fast. I kind of just remember throwing out the Christmas tree yesterday, but we are already in the middle of April. Things are looking up for sure. I'm just going to wait for you guys to start joining me here today. I'm not going to talk about anything specific today, but I'm going to talk about bunch of specific things, but no big topic. There are just a few things that I wanted to talk to people about. Let's start with the one that is the most common in the past 2 weeks. Can people travel? More specifically, to where and how? So, if you want to travel to a specific country, first of all, let's start whether you are a US citizen, a green card holder, or whether you have a visa or advanced parole. Those things will determine sometimes the places where you can travel and places that you cannot travel to. Now, there are what's called COVID travel restrictions that are in place, and they affect certain people differently. There are countries to which the US citizen or green card, well, US citizen cannot travel to, not because the US government doesn't allow them to travel there, but because the country where they're traveling to will not let a person from the US in. There's a lot of examples in the EU in which travel to the country is restricted with certain exceptions, such as if you're married to a citizen of that country, or if you're a child of a citizen of that country, and with limited exception for like equivalence of a national interest and certain business situations. So when you call us and you say, can I travel to that specific country? The question sometimes is not whether you can travel there, is whether they will actually accept you. And it's an ever evolving situation, and sometimes guidelines change day to day. There are a lot of countries that are on red alert. That means if you go to the Department of State, the Department of State of the US government says that they strongly advise and discourage travel to a specific country, for example, Poland. And it would be red alert. A lot of the times it means that the embassy, US embassy in that country, is working at a very limited capacity, and oftentimes it only provides limited services to US citizens and potentially green card holders. The reason it's different for green card holders and US citizens is because if you're, let's say, a citizen of Poland and you have a green card to the US, as a citizen of Poland, you can go to Poland. Now, then the issue becomes, how do you travel back to the US? And that can mean a lot of different things depending where we are in the cycle. As you know, there are evolving situations around the world, in India and in Brazil, and the CDC basically discourages travel to like 75% of the world right now. Of course, there are exceptions. Now, I'm going to touch on a subject that works specifically for our clients. First scenario, let's say we were able to get your loved one a visa. Let's say it's an immigrant visa. Let's say it was given to them for 6 months. And your loved one, before traveling to the US, wants to land in another country to visit a relative for other purposes, whatever it may be. We highly discourage that because you can land in the country from which travel is banned directly to the US, which means even if you touch down in that country, you then have to go to a third country, quarantine for 14 days, and only then enter the US. That's issue number one. So that, you know, expands how much you're going to spend, and, timing and stuff like that. Second one, and I think arguably the more important one, what if you touch down in the country and you spend 24 hours there, and within 24 hours, the US suspends travel from that country to the US? Or that country goes on a lockdown and you can't leave that country? What if air travel is suspended, borders are closed down? Your visa to the US is limited in time. And there have been situations, there's still situations where there are countries that have been on a lockdown, um, you know, for extended periods of time. So if your visa expires in that scenario, most likely you're going to have to be re-interviewed. The visa is going to have to be reissued. There's a plethora of issues that then come on board. Highly discouraged if we, in this day and age, got you an immigrant visa or a visa that allows you to travel to the US. Um, Take advantage of it. The sooner the better, because the situation is evolving. And even though sometimes it feels like we're inside the US or in New York or New Jersey or, some other states or on the other side of this, a lot of the world is on a lockdown, and there are places where the numbers are going down, and you don't know what the government of that country is going to decide to do in terms of the borders. Okay? Now, second scenario. There are certain clients of ours who have reentry permits, travel documents. And they ask us, can I travel to such and such country? Theoretically, again, you have to check the Department of State. That's one. Number two, you have to check what the regulations are in that country. Go to that country government website, immigration website, and check what it is that they require. Do they require PCR, COVID test? Do they want you to quarantine? There are countries in which when you land there, you automatically have to quarantine for 14 days. And there are countries in which you have to go to these quarantine hotels and you bear the cost of staying there. And if you're traveling then back to the US from that country, you have to make sure that you can actually travel directly to the US and not have to quarantine somewhere for 14 days. Highly discouraged, unless, again, it's an emergency situation. But even in the emergency situation, you have to plan ahead. There are delays with airplanes. Sometimes they're overbooked. Sometimes they're suspended. Sometimes the situation in a country can change from Friday to Monday. The world is still in the pandemic, although it feels much better than it did a year ago. And I feel like to an extent, it's almost like we did learn to live with it. And to an extent, of course, it's, the numbers are going down. Don't forget, we're in a warm weather right now, so there's a lot of activities outside. So it feels different than it did in December. But there are countries that are still struggling and that can restrict travel to and from at any point. A reentry document, let's say your wife or husband or your child applied for you and you have a pending adjustment of status application and you got your travel document. Please remember that those are not supposed to be used for casual vacation and travel. Those are really supposed to be used for emergency situations. Of course, if we're not in a pandemic, and depending on who the administration is in the White House, sometimes the rules are more relaxed than other times. But keep in mind that if you get stuck outside of the US with an expiring reentry permit in cause significant delays in your case. There have been times when people were stuck out for like 6 months because they traveled too close to an expiring work permit, and the CBP, Customs and Border Protection, decided not to allow them in and asked them to provide a new travel document. That is on travel. Now, there's another big issue that is happening, and that is the issue with the fingerprints. There was a bunch of applications for naturalizations that were filed in early 2020, and people for the longest time did not get their biometrics. Called, asked, got the usual within processing time, got the usual USCIS response, and then in first quarter of 2021 we got a whole bunch of USCIS mail that said your client's fingerprints are going to be reused. And here our clients were worrying about why has it been a year and no biometrics appointment has been scheduled. So that issue has been kind of resolved, and the citizenships are going forward. When it comes to renewals of green cards, especially for people who are stuck abroad, this is the latest. USCIS knows it hasn't scheduled a bunch of fingerprint appointments. USCIS has changed its policy for emergency fingerprint appointments, and the list is basically pretty narrow. You have to be like a frontline worker. There has to be an emergency or national importance exemption. Otherwise, what happened is they sent you a green thick paper which extended your green card for 1 year. Usually what happens is you file the green card extension, you go to a biometrics. At the biometrics appointment, they extend your card for another year or year and a half, depending on what the processing times are. Because nobody has gone to biometrics, and people's green cards expired and they weren't able to get info passes because you have to meet certain requirements to even have an info pass scheduled, now that they changed it from an online system to a call center. So people were essentially stuck with no expired green cards, no ability to get stamps in their passports, no ability to travel, and sometimes people need to travel, medical reasons, family reasons, business reasons, So in the beginning, again, first quarter of 2021, we got a bunch of mail from USCIS that extended the person's green card and the person's ability to travel without a biometrics appointment, without a stamp and a passport, with just an expired green card and the extension letter. And we already had clients who've traveled on that extension letter, and it's fine. It does become an issue because let's say your client needs to travel outside of the US, no biometrics appointment has been scheduled, and let's say the client plans on being outside of the US for 1 month. What if the client gets stuck? And while they're stuck, their biometrics appointment comes in, which we then have to reschedule. And let's say we submit a request for a reschedule and they do approve it, and the client comes in, but then the biometrics appointment again is stuck up in USCIS void. So it is an ever-evolving situation, and that also goes back to the travel, and the fact that travel right now is highly discouraged because it is problematic on more than one issue. Getting stuck abroad, lack of appointments, lack of extensions, lack of info passes, and so on and so forth. Sorry about that. So that's that. On travel further, the travel ban for L1s, H1Bs, and certain other non-immigrant work visas has not been lifted, but it expired. And I think that was a very smart move. Instead of having half the country up in arms on things, this administration just allowed certain bans to just expire. That means those people can travel to the US. There are situations in which they have to quarantine in a third country before entering the US. Most of the time, the beneficiary of that policy is Mexico. People go and hang out for 14 days in Mexico and they just enter the US. Who does it benefit? Except, I don't know. I don't know what the point of that is, because what, there's no coronavirus in Mexico. I have no idea. But that's what's in place. Um, and then COVID bans, so-called COVID bans, are still in place. There are some reciprocal bans between EU, UK, Ireland, and the US and some other countries. We track the statuses sometimes daily, depends on the needs of our clients, but certainly weekly we monitor the situation. It is ever evolving. We had people travel before to India, where now I would highly, 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 highly discourage it. I just want to say one thing about it. I get that people want to travel, and I get that it feels like we're out of it, but we're actually not. And sometimes you have to set a priority between the importance of traveling right specifically at this moment and the importance of your immigration case proceeding. Not that they're mutually exclusive, and of course, we don't feel good about restricting people's ability to move around, but it's just the nature of the situation in which we're in. So that's fun. And then it's funny because we have people who were able to travel to a Caribbean, let's say, country in 1 month, and the requirements were this. And then the people travel there the following month, and then the requirements already changed. So I don't joke when I say that they can change over a weekend. That has happened when people landed in a country, and that day, let's say, the curfew was cut, like it was 11 and now it's 9 or something like that, or the quarantine requirements were cut, or um, the testing requirements were cut. Also, please double check with your airline what type of COVID test they require. I know that a month ago, JetBlue, you could travel with just without a PCR, just uh, antiviral test, which was like easier and faster and sometimes cheaper, and then some airlines required a PCR test. That's on traveling. Always ask a question. If you are in doubt, definitely ask a question. Definitely check the Department of State is where you go first, and then from there it usually has even links to the appropriate agency in the country to which you want to travel, that kind of has the guidelines um, contained on that country. So start with the Department of State and then just go down the rabbit hole. Um, Pun intended. That's it. I want to remind people that Syrian TPS re-registration process, re-registration period expires next month. So if you haven't re-registered and you need to, definitely take advantage of that ASAP. It looks like USCIS is going to be reopening at full capacity in June. They have been interviewing people, but it looks like they will be back in office and going full steam ahead. So we're expecting, faster processing times and a lot more interviews coming up. There are still offices around the country which only allow 2 people in a room, And that means that if you're a husband and a wife going in for an interview, the attorney cannot come in with you. What we do for those situations is we just provide a G28, which is a form stating that you're represented by an attorney, and the officer will call us, and an attorney will be present over the phone. It is the second best thing. It's better to have an attorney over the phone than not to have an attorney at all. So that immigration courts in New York remain to be closed, in New Jersey in a limited capacity. A lot of things are not going forward. State courts in New York are reopening in-person hearings on May 24th. Or nay, depends what kind of case you have. But that's encouraging because, that's a government entity and that's a government determination. So if they've determined that it's pretty safe for their staff to return to work, I think they might see very encouraging numbers on the ground. What else? Don't forget some dates. If you have an expiring work authorization, you want to contact us at least 6 months before it expires because of the processing time. If you have a 2-year conditional green card, you want to contact us at least 4 months before it expires, because 90 days before the expiration, it has to be mailed out. The interview notices usually come 5 months before the interview. If you get one and you're not contacted by us within 24 hours, make sure to reach out, because sometimes USPS, which is what the immigration services use, they can experience delays, and sometimes we'll get something before the client and we'll reach out, or the client may get something before us and they reach out to us and we schedule them for preparation and stuff. I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. Give us a call, email us, text us, or send it here on Facebook. Stay safe, stay healthy, continue to get vaccinated, because that's going to allow us to reopen. Or, if you've already been through it, I hope you're feeling well and better. People are continuing to return to the workforce, and we're very, very happy to see that. People are, getting married, having kids, so a lot of it feels almost post-COVID, which can be a little deceptive, but does feel good. I wish everybody a great rest of the week. I hope the weather's going to be amazing this weekend, so we can all go out and enjoy the weather. And I will see you next Thursday at 10 o'clock. And hopefully there's going to be some more good news, maybe some interesting updates, maybe some travel restriction ban lifted or put in place, or, if there anything major that happens in the next 7 days, we will definitely devote the whole time talking about that. It's nice to see everybody today, and I will see you next time.